Let me thank you, Mrs. Mark, for this very incisive and also, in some respects, provocative um, guidelines or outlines as relates innovation and entrepreneurship. And in fact, as you were just concluding, one of the things that you highlighted, which probably one would really want to take into close consideration, is that of community entrepreneurship. And within the context of the changing psychology of trade and doing business, where, for example, in the past, you would go to a shop down the street, you would ask for the goods, you would hand over your money, you know the person knows you. Then it moved to the mailing, where generally you knew the person, and you hand over your money, and your product was given, a physical product. Now it's a totally different perspective, where you operate on an internet platform. You probably don't know the person. You don't know where they are in some cases. Yet you see the balance of trust and confidence changing. Within that context, and in terms of developing the community entrepreneurship approach, what are the fundamental principles you would put forward in terms of addressing this particular issue? Yes, that's a question to you.
You mean, so in other words, the question is to develop community entrepreneurship, what would be some of the fundamentals?
What are the fundamental principles, considering the whole context of the changing psychology of trade and investment and business approaches?
Well, I think, again, as I said, how you use technology would be important, because when we're talking community entrepreneurship, community are diverse, they have different needs. I mean, most of us know they have different social issues as well. So I think the technology infrastructure in those communities are important. And unfortunately, those areas are the ones that get the infrastructure sometimes late or lost. So that if you ask maybe a mobile provider, you'll see that they will service other areas, and those areas would be left behind. Even though those areas are areas that we need to address, because again, in the context of the region, crime and social issues are plaguing us, not only in those communities alone. So I would say the social infrastructure is important. Education. And again, the role for technology, online education is important, because you have to provide information in order to attract the players, provide them with information and knowledge, so that I think e-commerce, e-education, as I call it, will become increasingly important to provide them with the information in terms of where the opportunities are, how they can leverage on those opportunities. All right? So I would say education. I would say the social platform, and I think the role of the state is also important. Some of the policy initiatives, and while I say there's limited fiscal space, I think there should be some initiative on the part of the state in order to support those areas. It can be done via an NGO. We would want to see more partnerships in terms of public-private partnerships initiatives. And what I would like to see is where some successful companies work with those communities and engage them, so that some of the businesses that they come up with can provide some measure of service to the larger, more established entity, which brings me into the realm of corporate venture capital, which again perhaps could be something that can be examined using technology. So where you have the more established players finding ways to work with those communities, recognizing that once you have the technology platform, you'd be amazed in terms of the reach. Because you go in those areas, once the platform is there, almost everyone has a mobile phone, right? So I would say those would be some of the areas we need to address to make it happen. Information, the platform, and I think some commitment by some of the key players, be it the state, private sector.
Yeah, and I would ask one or two other questions to stimulate the discussion, but then thereafter we would just open up to the general audience. But in the presentation which we just saw, you highlighted some of the transaction and financial mechanisms that could be utilized. Some of them you mentioned, the SUSU, the crowd funding, etc. But one of the things that has been noticed, and probably I would pose this question to both yourself and also to Terrance, considering that you have been working extensively in the Caribbean capital markets. What are some of the financial services suites that has been put together to support SMEs in recent times?
So you have some large corporate entities on one end in their world, and then we have these SMEs who somehow seems to be like nobody's business on the other end, so that in the quest to provide some measure of financial support to them, we use the same yardstick, which is the same debt financing. That may be financial capital, yes, but not appropriate capital for them, such that when they get it, they do not build a sustainable model, and 2-3 years down the road, they fail. So to put a window in a bank and call it a SME window, and your criteria is such that there's this misalignment between what you're giving me and what I need, is a recipe for failure. So that the question is, even with that whole venture capital program in the context of the region, it failed. In every single jurisdiction, it had failed. Because while I was overall in charge, and that was more the initiative from the Trinidad standpoint, Barbados, Jamaica, all over. Jamaica within recent times have decided we're going to adopt a new model to see if there's going to be success. What is in that model? How are we going to use technology? In the final analysis, we know there's a measure of risk. And we don't want to be using products because they've been used in other markets. We have to look at the specifics of our environment and come up with products. And I would say, I don't want a bank to say they're having a SME window and a lending window, and they're providing loans and they're making it easier. And really and truly, it has not been successful for that same reason. I am seeing some hope for SMEs with things like the angel investor groups. And I think you have about 3 in the region, 2 in Jamaica, 1 in Barbados. And I know InfoDev of the World Bank is spearheading that initiative to see a vibrant angel network in the region. In addition, the whole issue of crowdfunding. Lovejack, Graduate School of Business, UB, where I lecture, they recently developed a crowdfunding platform. I don't think it is fully launched just yet. But one of the things I was advocating all along, we have all these business schools throughout the region. And when everybody ends up with this fancy MBA, I don't know as much as 2% of the businesses that they present for the final paper actually go into market. You understand? Why? Some of them are very innovative, but they can't get the money. They don't get the support. So to your point, you want a product that is not just financial capital, but one that sees all the other issues in order to build a sustainable enterprise. And I think that's what we have to look at.
And talking about the sustainability mechanisms, in fact, I would want to engage Tracy here now, because I know that you have been involved in the sector from the perspective of innovation, and probably it would be good to look at some of the sustainability mechanisms, as well as probably access to if not equity funding, but other aspects of other aspects of angel funding, etc., as the case may be, if that was your experience.
So I'm just looking at the topic of the presentation, which is not only about funding, right? So
yeah,
so
it encompasses innovation and
so
entrepreneurship.
we broaden the topic from
Yes.
beyond the funding, and you talk about sustainability. So one of the things that I would like to say that I've worked with SMEs for a long time. Since I worked in the South Chamber, and there's been a lot of talk about catching the latest wave and the lack of education and so on. We've been hearing it here today. And one of the things I'm firmly in favor of is businesses doing things on their own, learning on their own, finding information on their own, and not simply following fashion. Sustainability is about knowing what you have to offer and making it viable and offering it to the market. We talk a lot about apps and the apps for financial services, and that's one of the topics here. But it's very important to listen to this blogger who said that, give you an example. It's silly to do apps. Do the mobile internet instead. That's what most of your consumers want anyway. And an interesting point he makes is that apps are a sideshow, a freak show powered by idiots out of America who want to push Apple and Google profits. Most apps never break even. The median app developer earns $400, not $400 per month, $400 in total. And this is something that I've been trying to indicate when the InfoDev guys come and when the World Bank comes and has all these app development contests and startup weekends and all these things. You have a lot of people doing stuff, presenting plans, presenting apps. And as we've been saying here, where does it go after that? The reason is there's not enough of understanding of what the consumer is asking for and what you're trying to do. And that's very relevant to the financial services sector. And one of the things I've been advocating is really having the businesses or the potential businesses to try and be sustainable, understanding what people need. And I actually think there's a very good role for government in this play. I've also been saying that you're building apps not in a context, you're building solutions without a context. Is it not possible that the governments in the region, the largest buyer of goods and services, can work together with the SME sector, the app developers, and say things like, this is what we need, this is what we're looking for. Why don't you build this for us? We will help you, government actually can fund, and then you can take the solution and go up the region with it. So whatever island you're in, you build an app to do, tax services or open data type solutions, and you build that application, and then you take it from there, and you go somewhere else with it, and you try and make that sustainable, as opposed to simply writing a plan. You have a good idea. I'm going to replicate Uber. I'm going to replicate this service. I'm going to build an app, put it in the app store, and just hope for the best. And as the blogger says, it's true. There are 1 billion apps in each of the app stores. 1 billion apps. The majority of those apps are from the OECD countries. The majority of those app developers and app makers fail. Far less for the Caribbean app developers who are trying to make it in any sector, far less the financial services sector. So if you look at it from that angle, we do need to find a better match between what people are asking for and what people are doing. And I think until that is happening, we're going to have this problem of a disconnect. And the only way to solve that, I think, is through educating yourselves, understanding what the market is about, and for government and similar agencies getting involved.
In fact, I think you have underscored a very fundamental principle, and that is in terms of developing applications, etc., one ought not merely to look at the ICT sector only in and of itself, but probably the various problematic issues right across sectors, whether it be the tourism sector, which I often say is really an information product from start to finish, and therefore is probably one of the better sectors for the assimilation of ICTs. And then, of course, the health services sector. What are the various problems in these sectors and how we could stimulate? And that is the next issue I would want to throw out now for general discuss. What are the fundamental issues that we need to look at to stimulate a new entrepreneurial class? How do we go about doing that? How do we consolidate them, cluster them, such that there would be, it would serve as buttressing. If you can cluster them, they have other businesses that would immediately be relying on their expertise and service. So that would create a certain kind of cohesiveness, yes?
Let me just comment here, because you touched on it a bit, and Tracy, and I remember you from the South Chamber. Good. You know, I always say, and you were concerned about us just trying to do an app or Uber or whatever we see somebody else do. I always go back to your environment. What is the problem? And try to solve those problems. How many of you, and I'm saying this because of an experience I had traveling to Ghana, and when you travel across the region and you move from country to country, and how much time you spend, and how many questions you answer, right? And it just asking you this, so that if you're moving, say, with Liat, between Trinidad to St. Martin, might be the highest point, and you're stopping about 5 islands in between, all CARICOM member states. And you probably have to come off because of when next Liat is leaving. You would have, why you here? What do you come for? What are you going to do? And a whole range of questions, right? Okay. And your people might say, we should be the last to complain. But the thing is, I was going to Ghana to teach, and every week it was the same question. I was there last week, come back again. And I'm saying, I mean, just was me, I'm not a tech person, but again, problem, solution. Could there be a way where somewhere from first sport, some information is filtered through because there's some collaboration so that it comes up on the computer and it reduces the time needed in moving through? So, and I'm saying this because we need to start coming up with innovative products that solve problems for us and create value as we seek to become competitive. I was about to mention health, and you're absolutely correct. Health is a major issue throughout the Caribbean, right? So instead of just doing what you see everybody else do in the developed world, those are the kinds of areas that we need to come up with innovative products and services. And likewise, because of the uniqueness of some of those areas, or financial services sector, or any other sector for that matter, taking a collaborative approach, will therefore see the need to innovate.
Questions from the floor? Yes.
Well, first of all, good evening and congratulations. Well done, excellent presentations. We are dealing with presentations and our discussion on the role of innovation and entrepreneurship in the Caribbean in the financial service sector. And the starting point for me really is to understand, what does innovation mean? Because it may mean different things to different people, whether it's in the financial sector or otherwise. And when we look at the Caribbean region, perhaps there are a couple of things we have to ask. Whatever the definition of innovation might be, do we have a culture of innovation? Do we have that environment where we encourage the risk that might be associated with innovation? Is there really commitment to innovation, as it were? And someone may argue, and rightfully so, that we really don't innovate, whatever that definition might be. It might be copying. It might be a replication of something else that might be outside there.
Iterating.
So my reason for coming and ask for, or probably seeking to take the mic here is to hear from you, from your own experience, innovation in the financial sector, to what extent, what does it mean? Do we have that culture? And then the words that I heard the presenter made earlier, Ms. Mark or Mrs. Mark, that sustainability, because it's always good to start something, but getting it off the ground and keeping it there. I don't know the kind of culture within the Caribbean region, so it would be useful to just get some immediate response.
Yes, please.
I would like to just
Okay.
that's an excellent question, Cleveland. To be totally frank with you, I think the word innovation is the most overused, abused, and frankly silly word in literature today. It's lost its meaning. We just say innovate for everything. The literature that you read in the MBAs and so on, innovation is really about creativity at a group level. So when we're talking about ICT and maybe even app development, a lot of it done is at an individual level. If you think about it for a second. So that means we should be focusing on creativity. In the Caribbean, if you look at it from that level, lots of creativity everywhere. We have all these creative services, industries, carnival, music, etc. So the seeds are there to do things that would be innovative if you are working in a group or in an organization. But we don't foster enough of the creativity beyond the creative services industries. So creativity leads to invention, not innovation. Invention. How many things have we invented in the region? You can name one or two, but not many. And as Cleveland says, we are replicating. I like to use the word we iterate. So we do a lot of adding on to things, which is great. Nothing is wrong with that per se. But to focus only on that and to use the word innovation to cover everything that means, I think gives it a really a bad name. As I said, it's lost its meaning, and therefore we have challenges in understanding what it really means. Because innovation is really, if you go to it means a whole different set of things than we think it means. So I think that we need to get back to first principles, to creativity and invention. That's my take on it. Thank you.
Okay. I was just about to put on my academic hat. but I'll let Terrance go first. I'll leave my academic hat for last. I have different hats, so.
Along the lines like Tracy is saying, the distinction between innovation and invention is critical. On the invention side, you are making something, and typically we're talking about basic research, something from scratch. Once you actually have a basic idea, this is related to this, we're not exactly sure how this is related to this, you then take that to the next level, and you said, you know what, if we take this and we add that to it, we get a particular product here, and that works. That is invention, this part here is innovation. So let's ask ourselves, what is Uber? Is Uber something that is innovative, or is Uber an invention? That's the point. So getting to some of the issues that you're talking about here, really and truly, it's important, but does it really make a difference, bottom line, as to getting something out there, getting a product out there? Do we have the people, do we have the culture that will actually allow for that to happen? That's a fundamental issue. Some years ago, we were part of, when I first met Judith, I was actually an investment manager for a private equity company, and I worked in the Southern Caribbean region. I looked over that entire period of 2.5 years. I saw 200 companies, 200 projects. 200 is nothing. You get in Canada, for example, one particular venture capital company will get maybe 300 or 400 per analyst per year. I got 200 over the course of 2.5 years. And of the 200, and people don't seem to be aware of how private equity or venture capital works, of the 200, there were only 4 that looked decent. That ratio, which is that 2%, is absolutely the norm. In fact, the last thing I heard was that it's now less than 2%. So, and that is really, from a financing perspective, and understanding the challenges when you actually have an idea and you have a product and I want to be able to go and take this out and I want to be able to get funding, it's not as easy as you may think. Do we have the people who are actually able to do that? Do we have a culture that does that? I have to go and tell you, don't know. It is so much easier to simply import something and sell it in a shop and put a little markup on it and be very happy.
We call it value add.
Exactly, and you call it value added. What are we really doing?
Which means, if I may interject here,
Yeah.
which means, therefore, based on what you've just said, it brings us back to the question earlier on, which was posed, and that is, what are the fundamental principles that we can embrace to create a new entrepreneurial class?
Well, can I?
Because that would be fundamental based on what you've asked.
Yeah.
If we do not have that culture, what are the principles that we can utilize to stimulate that new
Well, I
entrepreneurial
think
class?
Judith and I were talking about that a little earlier, just to finish up so Judith could add. The fact is, what we are identifying, what Judith and I were talking about in the back is, we are now starting to see the makings of some real entrepreneurial class in the region. We are starting to see people who are starting to think differently. It's not just a case of being able to import something, put a shingle up and try and sell something anymore. Can we actually do something that's different? And one of the main reasons is the fact that they now have this. So they could actually go on here and see that other things are happening worldwide. Our generation, not seeing that. The younger generation, the people who are in their 20s, who now coming out to university and who are now aware of that, that is where we have a lot of hope for what is being done. Look at Gabriel with BIT. How old is Gabriel? That is the kind of mindset that we need to have, and I'm beginning to see signs of it at that particular age. I would like to see who is these people that he's talking about, Bitbox in Trinidad. If I have to think as to who it is likely to be, it'll be somebody in the 20s or 30s. That is a real break from what we've had in the past. And I think that is where we have a lot of hope for the future. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, let me see. Creativity, critical thinking, all those things lead to innovation. Innovation, you don't have to be totally new. Somebody can take Uber, adapt it to our market, do something with it, but of significant value, and you would have innovated. You don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to invent it. But if you enhance it through some form, it would be considered an innovation. The extent to which you create value significantly is what. Let us take carnival costumes. In the past, you go down to a mass camp, you look at the costume. To begin with, you probably don't know, you say what you want. So if you were probably in another island, you probably ask your friend in Trinidad to go down to the mass camp and look at the costumes and select one for you. How is it done now? Anywhere in the world where you feel, if you want to play mass in Trinidad, you could go online, look at the costume. I suspect now they probably have where the model could turn backward, forward, model, do whatever. See how it would look if you wear it in green, purple, white. That is innovation along the business model in terms of how you engage the customer, how you sell to the customer, how you communicate to the customer. Right? And out of that, they would have innovated their business model, because all things being equal, I guess that particular mass camp is probably also getting some revenue streams via ads on the website. So it is a new way of creating value along the value chain, if I may say that. And it could be significant in terms of the product itself being changed significantly, and therefore it's innovative. All things being equal, you have your minor changes, which would be the iterations, but then you could have significant changes where you would have innovated. But be that as it may, let's not split hairs. Whether we invent or whether we innovate, we want a different kind of product and service coming to the market, right? And what we recognize now, because you can even innovate without technology. While now technology is facilitating innovation at a faster rate in terms of reach and so on, you could innovate even without, and that was done in the past. You had innovation without technology. But I think our point is we need to have it done one way or the other. And I firmly believe, and it is something that I did before, it starts from the very young. It starts in our classrooms. You can have innovation in not only with bringing businesses, innovation takes place even in corporations. So when I teach entrepreneurship, there's something called that entrepreneurial creative mind and organization who will know how to scan that environment within the organization to see how value could be created in a significant way for that organization. That is innovation.
Yes,
I'd just like to get back to looking at the financial services sector itself and innovation. What we are looking at right now globally is fundamental changes in how things are being done. When you're looking at banking, there's a whole range of products and services that are coming out by small companies. Started out small, they got some funding, and they are now pretty large companies, some of them billion-dollar companies. They are focused in areas such as lending. You've heard of Lending Tree. Everybody will have heard of Lending Tree at some point in time. You may have not have heard of Prosper. You may have heard of Funding Circle. All of these are types of companies that are coming out, all started by people who generally worked in a bank and saw that there was a problem and decided they're going to fix that problem. That's lending. Then there's payments. We talked a lot about payments. Apple Pay and Square and all of these different kinds of payments. Again, if you know that it's going to take, if Western Union is going to take $60 away from you before you even start, that is a problem. And you need to find a solution. And that's where the entrepreneur starts working. And that's where we need to start working. Same thing for investments. Another big area where there is a lot of activity taking place is where you have robo-advisors. You ever heard of robo-advisors? Robo-advisors is where basically you now have an algorithm that takes some sense of what kind of risk profile you have and create a portfolio for you. So you no longer have a broker dealer charging you 2% or 3% fees per year. They're charging you a fraction of it, and they're doing it strictly based upon looking at algorithms, looking at the financial markets, looking at stock exchange, and choosing stocks and bonds for you. And these things are happening. Why? And all of these companies were started out by, vast majority, from what I have read, people who actually worked in those companies, who saw the problem, and who had done an entrepreneurial hat and said, we could fix this. Now, there is potential for that here. What is our, if you were to put money in a mutual fund right now, what are you going to get? 0.5%?
Maybe.
What's your borrowing rate? 10%? There's a gap. Yes, here, it's in Jamaica, it's everywhere there's a gap. That's a problem. Is there a solution to it? If you go in a bank, you have to line up from here to down the road. Is there a solution to that? There are ways in which actually entrepreneurs, there are reasons for entrepreneurs to come into being. But it gets back again to some of the questions that we talked about before. Do we have a class? Do we have a group of people who could do that? And again, I think there are some young people who actually have the ability and will be doing that coming forward.
And
Yeah,
then,
Tracy.
let me
Yeah, I think Tracy, and then we'll probably also want to hear from a little more from the audience. We're winding down because I noticed we are just over short time, but I'd want to give you the benefit. Please, Tracy. And then
Right, so you may wonder why that is on the slide that just appeared. Thank you, Peter, for putting it up. That's a book that was released 3 weeks ago, by Don Tapscott, the author of Economics. We heard a lot about Bitcoin and blockchain. Now, blockchain is a technology that is not only about Bitcoin. So you're talking about financial services industry, and just to finalize your point, that thinking, blockchain thinking, read that book. It's the best. I'm about halfway through now. That book is the best book for a non-technical person to read about blockchain, as far as I can tell. You're going to understand what's happening in the financial services industry by reading this. What you're going to start seeing are businesses emerging, doing transactions that completely eliminate the banking and traditional sectors. completely. Contracts can be done using this technology. You can actually eliminate people who are doing the, those things. What do you call those things when you stamp on a contract? The
For the sale?
sealing,
Seal.
all those things that because what blockchain does is create trust between parties, and not. So if you're using this technology and you're creating a new financial services application or industry, anybody in this room today can invest in this blockchain thinking and create new solutions. Create new solutions from the ground up in the Caribbean region that will exist in the region and globally as a solution that can work around the world. Believe it or not, that can happen today. Read that book. You all can all do it. All the young people can do it. It's happening now. Right now it's happening. Don Tapscott wrote that book. Came out 2 weeks ago. That is where things are going. Full disintermediation.
Okay, we'll just take 2 more questions from the audience, if there are questions from the audience. And then I think, Judith, you had a comment which you wanted to make. So, any more questions from the audience?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes?
I don't want to hog the mic, but no one
That's
else
fine.
had asked for the request to probably make a request concerning the questions. And I appreciate the contributions, and I think it's useful. The reason for this particular part of the workshop, for me, is really to understand from a Caribbean perspective. And the emphasis to me in this section has been in the financial service sector. Innovation and entrepreneurship for the financial sector. So of course we have a lot of creativity, whether it's in art, music, carnival, whatever. But I go back to, as you said, Terrance, where is that in the financial sector for the Caribbean region? And that's why I asked the question, because to me it was broader than that. What is the culture? Whether it's the bank, the insurance company, whether it's bond, whether it's share, whatever it might be. And I am trying to take away equally the experiences. So it's very good to make references, and we can, because that's what is out there. Even this reference, I was not even aware of it, but it has been developed outside, within the Caribbean region, with the emphasis on the financial sector. We have had a world crisis, a financial crisis. But we come back to what extent even those things that we know and we add on, and whether we put a value and whatever it might be. I started by the question of the definition. What does it mean for us? Two, the other part now is, do we actually know how much innovation, creation, whatever we choose to identify within the region, in the financial service, and do we measure it? Because the measurement of that in itself will give us the effect of some of those changes, will give us some sense as to either what we're doing good, bad, or indifferent. So hence the reason for coming a second time in here. I think it's extremely important because, quite frankly, my general experience is that you have here what you get outside. That's the thing. You really get what you have outside in the banking and other sectors, but to say there are new ones, you did mention the Bitcoin, a good thing for the Caribbean. But I do believe there's a need for some kind of culture, some kind of structure, some kind of incentives that you need to have, whether policy orders, to have that creative juice in that sector be stimulated not only once, but for continuity.
Well,
no, I just want to, take both.
Yeah.
Afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Seaton. I'm here
Hi,
from
Cadette.
IGovCT. So, great conversation. What I want to contribute here is not so much a question, but the concept of innovation and the iteration is great. But one of the challenges we face is that and Ian spoke about it from actually this morning, the availability of information, both internally in the country and externally in the Caribbean, is not always available to allow the entrepreneurs to really have access to information, to allow them to see what's happening in their space and to allow them to develop these new applications or look at what's available for them, produce these new businesses that can be available.
Okay, you want to handle it? Okay, so just to deal with the second point first. As I was saying before, almost everybody now has one of these. And all you have to do is be curious. And you will find something that is useful, something that you will not have known before. However, to get into areas of the financial sector, which is specific, this is why I was saying earlier, a lot of the people who have actually started these small businesses that are now into the debanking of banking have actually worked in banks. They went in, they understood what was going on, they saw the issues at hand, and they came out and decided to fix it themselves. So this is one of the things that I'm not sure how many people are doing that, and that gets back to your point, which is how do we actually know what is happening? Cool. But the point is, I'm hearing of companies coming up, of people coming up who are asking questions or who are talking about forming companies to deal with some of these issues. So the entrepreneurs of the future will be coming into this area here and will be looking in the financial sector. We've seen a couple, and I've seen a couple of companies have actually emerged. One of the things that we have done in our company is actually to look at, and this is unique, because what we have created is not something that you could find anywhere. I've looked, I have not seen it anywhere else globally. But what we have done is pretty simple, straightforward, but what we have done is a reverse auction where companies that want to borrow money come onto that platform, and you have institutional investors on the other side, and you bid for it. You bid to lend people money. And it's a reverse auction. So you start at 6%, somebody will then come back and say 5.95, 5.90, 5.80. At the end of the auction, the cheapest wins. I have not seen that anywhere. That's ours. And that solves a lot of problems with the gap between the borrowing rate at 10% and the deposit rate at 0.5%. But that's just an example of what we have done. But there are others out there, I'm sure, which we will hear about in time. But sorry, go back.
Yeah, so just to answer Cleveland's question about the solutions in the region are affected by the environment in which they operate, as we were indicating earlier and Judith was talking about as well. We are solving payment problems to a large extent. The reason for that, as we went through it yesterday, as well as the lack of support from the banks to do merchant accounts for the people who want to do things. So you're seeing creation/innovation from individuals who are trying to solve that problem in the region, and you're seeing it in Trinidad in particular from companies who are trying to intermediate between what the banks are doing and what the customer wants. So there are about 5 or 6, just to answer your question quickly, there are about 5 or 6 of those companies around today. Actually, there was one gentleman in the room, I know he went, Ian Allen, who I think is going to be presenting tomorrow as Paywise, who is disintermediating the payment and collection part of it. So you pay and you collect somewhere. I can't remember exactly how it works, but he will talk about it tomorrow. There's a company called Novo, who is using the ACH system in Trinidad to try and facilitate online payments. There's a company called Paywise, who is behind the ticketer app that Movietown is offering, and they're offering a payment service locally based, but in the US, trying to explain, that's how things are these days. Locals in the US trying to do things for locals here. And there's another type of service, I think, emerging where you're finding companies who are offering website designs and so on, trying to tag along to merchant services from other banks. So you're finding that the clearing houses that they offer in Bermuda and so on are trying to offer these services. So they're primarily solving payment problems that we have. We don't have people trying to solve, as yet, the lending and the financing part of it, as far as I know. I'm not sure if anybody else could clarify, but I think we're only solving the consumer. The consumer is asking for, I want to have you pay for things online, help me. And you're getting those solutions emerging. The problem we're facing, though, is that, as we said yesterday, is that the regulations and the regulators are not yet keeping up with them. So they're like with the bit.com, they're behind in terms of delivering that service to market. Yeah.
Well, we would take two last comments. I noticed Terrance, and then the last comment, since you started, then we would end on Judith. So we would just.
You want to answer the question?
So we would-
No, I answered that question already. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Judith, go ahead.
Yes, I was saying you could, if you have and we'll just end on Judith.
No,
Yeah.
I answered. So now just end.
Okay.
Oh, you have answered already. Okay, then. So Judith, and then we would round off.
Well,
Yeah.
first of all, Cleveland.
Sorry, there's somebody you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment. But I didn't know if you were done with the question.
Let's try to make it very brief because we are exceeding the time.
Fantastic, thank you.
Time limit.
Blaine Marcano, I'm here with Clarke Caribbean, one of the organizing organizations.
Mhm.
And I came in a bit late, but I just wanted to add my 2 cents. I consider myself a millennial, and I have colleagues, and I myself have innovated many times. And from my experience, I would say that we really, really lack the environment for innovation within the region. And I'm going to be a little bit more specific. The tolerance to failure and the barrier to entry is very high. And from my experience, I've lived in Madrid for some time, it was really easy to innovate there, even as a foreigner. It was really easy to get involved. I remember even having the chance at winning awards. And having been back home, it's at least 10 times more difficult. Like, I'm even getting a little bit emotional about it because it's that serious. I lived in New York, worked there, and if it is you have a fantastic idea, your boss says, hey, you run with it, and they give you space. Here, I've had that experience in the UN, but not with Trinidadians. The UN hasn't had that, it's not the same culture within an international organization. So I'd say that's an exception. Outside of my case, it's really tough. And as you mentioned earlier, it takes a lot of failures before you actually hit a fantastic idea that can go somewhere. And if the barrier to entry is so high, how am I going to go start something, fail, start again, fail again, and gain experience to then innovate something that's fantastic? Because I've had to miss the mark at least 5 times before getting something that kind of works, which is not yet where it needs to be. So you get my point. And there are simple things you can do. We have a highly competitive nature here. There's competition. There are different ways that you can motivate young people so that they know that it's okay to put what your idea is out there and to fail. And that's just my comment.
Can I just make
Okay, then.
one final thing?
If it's very short.
It's very short.
Okay.
Just to put things in perspective, Walmart, that company developed after 6 attempts. So you're not alone. You have one more chance to go. All right? But the point is that it's never easy. You never know. In fact, a mantra in Silicon Valley is fail quickly and fail often.
Precisely. So I kind of understand, and my friends as well, colleagues, anyone who's innovating that I know, we kind of have it clear in our mind. But, if it is, you have a lot of motivation to do it and to fail. I just feel for those who, the 20-year-old, the 16-year-old who's out there, I feel like I've seen many people who's had ideas just diminish. I'm talking about fantastic scholars. I mean, we have scholarships every year. I don't know if you know what happened to these people. I've worked coaching some of these young people after they've returned, and they have some fantastic ideas diminish. And what can I say to him? Hey, go take a loan and pursue your dream. I don't know. I feel like I'm condemning him there to, a life of strife and poverty, because there isn't really an environment for that. You encourage, but at the same time, I have to say, hey, be sensible about your risk. And we don't have this, I would call Silicon Valley maybe a utopia because you have a lot of it, but we're really, really, really far off. We're really far.
Okay.
Yes, Judith,
right.
and then we
Let me
round
just-
off. Yes.
Cleveland's point. You wanted to hear, I know you haven't heard it per se, what are the innovative financial products that we've developed in the region? That was the question? Okay, what was the other part?
asking is, do we measure
Mhm.
the effect of
Oh yeah, that was the other piece. One was even the first piece. What are the financial products or services that we would have created in the region, and do we measure them in terms of the level or the impact, as the case may be? Two questions. One, it hasn't happened, or it isn't happening. We've heard some instances of it to a limited extent, but that isn't really far-reaching, so that's another issue. From where I sit, we could innovate on something that would have been developed anywhere in the world. We don't have to wait until we come up with a perfect product here. The other thing, there's nothing like a perfect product. So like when somebody goes to a financial institution, there's something called lean startup. You let the market decide and give you ideas to perfect it. But the tolerance for that is preventing those issues. So the best you will get to these so-called very innovative products would be the model of what somebody said, the locals in the US.
Yeah.
So that would be as close as we will get. Local people residing abroad where the environment fosters that kind of thing to happen. And case in point, I want to ask Terrance and all the bankers, why did that happen when you leave the bank? As opposed to in the institution, because that speaks to some challenges about innovation and creativity and allowing it to thrive within corporate structures or within any enterprise for that matter. Food for thought. No, I'm not blaming you, Terrance. It might be the environment.
I believe that there are so many different angles that we could look at that probably would end up spending a month of Sundays. But yet I would give you a last go at it very quickly.
Let me just talk very quickly about a couple of points about innovation. In terms of actual bank products, you know what a banker's acceptance is? Right. Bankers' acceptances are a product coming out of the OECD countries where you use that more for trade financing. Some smart person here took that and they use it for basically anything. You could have built a house with a BA. That's innovation. You know what are repos? You know what Jamaicans call repos? What they used to call repos? A repurchase agreement. I have securities, I give it to you as security, you lend me money. It's really a way of borrowing, of collateralized borrowing. It's a repurchase agreement. A repo in traditional markets, again OECD markets, are something that happens between banks involving hundreds of millions of dollars. The Jamaicans took that and created basically what is like a mini mutual fund out of that. So they brought it from hundreds of millions of dollars into smaller packets. And you can get your money back in 30 days with a particular interest rate, and it's secured by a particular bond. That's innovation. That's different. That's taking a product and tweaking it into something. But those things exist. By the way, both products have since been squashed by the regulatory authorities because they need to have them in line with international norms. So they just change the names a bit, but I think they're still around in some form or fashion.
Well, in wrapping up this session, I just noticed one very interesting development looking at the Economist Intelligence Unit's report of last year, which spoke to private sector development in the Caribbean, and I think they covered 14 countries. I think it was commissioned by the IDB, the CDB, and so on. And it says that the IDB is funding a project to jumpstart a regional hub, the Caribbean Regional Entrepreneurial Assets Commercialization Hub, to share effective strategies for managing and monetizing intangible business assets for Caribbean entrepreneurs, thereby helping firms to increase their market value, market their products, and find business partners. So it seems that there is something happening. Hopefully, I don't know if that is the case, but it would seem that there's something happening. Or is that the case?
Let me just.
I just throw that out. We can discuss that. Yes, but I just threw that out. So in closing, we see that there are a number of key elements that we need to concentrate on as far as creativity is concerned, as far as innovation, especially when it comes to the financial services sector. But I think more importantly, the wider sector when we think of innovation and creativity, and hence the direction the discussion took. Because if we understand the fundamental principles of innovation and creativity, then we can map that onto the specific sectors. I am quite encouraged by the kinds of discussion that we have had, and I wish that there was a lot more time, Judith, because I know you have done extensive work in that area, as well as Terrance and Tracy. But in the interest of time, I overshot time just for the benefit of the discussion. I will say no more, but I will call now on Mr. Cleveland Thomas, area representative. Oh, okay then. So we would do the wrap-up session for today. Thank you so much. Let me thank you, the head table, and with your profound discussion. Much appreciated. Thanks also for your patience.